right? What we want to do now is recap a little bit about what happens right after the assassination of the Archduke. We mentioned specifically that the Archduke is assassinated, and of course, Austria Hungary holds Serbia responsible. They gave them the ultimatum, a do this or else statement. And remember, how was that ultimatum worded? They give Serbia 48 hours to respond to a list of demands that was worded in such a way that they wanted them to reject it, so that they would have a reason to go to war. And once Austria-Hungary decides to go to war with Serbia, who's coming in to rescue Serbia? Russia. They're helping out their Slavic brothers. And then remember, Russia's got an alliance with Great Britain and France, and all alliances are activated, and now you got yourself a large scale war. All right. Now, we're going to talk about some military terms because I understand that you may not have the best in terms of military history, and there's some basics that you've got to know. Okay. So there's definitely a few terms we want to mention. One of them is infantry. Okay. For you people in the military-based atmosphere, uh, infantry. Anybody want to give us a good example? Aiden, what do you think? Regular foot soldiers. Okay, infantry refers to regular foot soldiers. In a military, you got jobs for all kinds of different people. All right, like you have an engineer corps that are people designed literally to set up engineering projects. All right, you got communications. All right, but infantry, those people are there specifically to fight. Bless you. All right, infantry. And notice I got these little graphics too. The Germans are wearing the more gray looking uniforms. They're known by their helmets with the spikes on them. They don't serve any practical function. They just thought they looked intimidating. So, like, it's not like you could just put your head down and ram somebody with them, but people thought it would terrify the enemy. However, it does make them very easy to spot. So, you see somebody with a spiked helmet, yeah. British and French soldiers and later Americans would usually wear like what they refer to as like an olive green color, and they have the more rounded helmet. All right. Infantry means you're going to fight. You're equipped with a rifle. You see they've got bayonets on there as well. Infantry is the most dangerous job in the military. You know that if you're in infantry, there's a good chance you're going to get hurt. Okay. Their job is to fight. And so when we say infantry, that's what we're referring to. Okay. Artillery is another term that a lot of people don't necessarily know. What's artillery referring to? That's a great way to put it. The evolution of cannons. And when we think about conflict, by the way, you'll like my little GIF here of cannons. All right. When we think of cannons, a lot of times we immediately think of cannons from like the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. But you said it really well, the evolution of cannons. Because by the time 1914 rolls around, our cannons have gotten a little bit better. Check out this right here. That's an example of a small cannon being used in World War One. Sir, howitzers is an example of a type of cannon, but not the only ones. Okay, and you can see that this right here at the bottom is what they call a breech-loaded cannon. It used to be like in the old days, like you see how that cannon's firing from the front. It used to have what was called a muzzle-loaded cannon. You load it from the front, but these are breech-loading. You load it from behind, and they fire them out there. Now, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or anything like that, but these cannons, like back in the American Revolution, you literally just put a huge hulking metal ball in there and the gunpowder would just cause it to fly out of there. And like, if you get hit by the cannonball, it like just separates you in two or blow a hole in you, and that's really uncomfortable, or so I hear. Okay, but by the Civil War and World War One, they changed the dynamic of it. Okay, what they're firing, like you can see this guy prepping them right here in this picture in the lower left, that he's got these shells, and these shells, they're not solid metal. What do they have inside them? Explosive powder. Okay, explosive powder. All right. Now, to give you an idea, these are what some of the shells could look like. All right. And to give you an example of how big they are, those are grown men beside of them. All right. Some of those shells are like the size of you all. like the size of a human being. Imagine a merit-filled shell was the gunpowder, a merit-sized shell. That's terrible. All right. And those right there, look, those giant cylinders would hold hundreds of pounds of gunpowder, and you could cause a big explosion. All right. And the idea was, is what would happen is when you fired these into the air, okay, they were timed in such a way that they would explode when they would hit certain, like above or just above the ground or on the ground. And it's not necessarily the gunpowder and the force that would kill you, it's the metal shrapnel, the shards of metal that come out from that explosive shell. All right. So you're there and you might get knocked down by the force, but it's like the three hunks of metal in your chest that are going to kill you. All right. These are extremely dangerous to be around. And something else that a terminology developed in World War I, and this is really the first time you see these major cannons used. We have a term used to describe if you got damaged by these shells. The term shell shock. Okay, the term shell shock. If you didn't get hit by the shrapnel, the force itself could knock you down, and you're also hearing a really loud sound. Another fun fact too: if you are a soldier and you worked with artillery, you better wear something to plug your ears. And even then, it's likely that you're going to have hearing damage at some point because they make incredibly loud noises. Imagine being near one of the explosions, right? The concussive force from the blast could knock you down, and you'd literally get a concussion, or you'd be kind of bleary, and you wouldn't basically know up from down, all right? And we refer to that as shell shock, okay? There's another term we'd use to describe it today. What do soldiers often deal with? PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. All right, and shell shock is in a similar category. All right, it's pretty much the same thing. So it's like, look, if you are infantry, you're going to have to go and fight, and there's the possibility that you're going to have to deal with artillery shells coming down near you as well. It's going to be a really dangerous terminology. Our third term we want to mention, armor. Okay, armor. Quinlan, what's armor? Tanks, man. Tanks for answering that. Look, there's a little tank. Okay. Look, that's what your World War I tanks, a lot of them generally look like. They're really small to start. Okay. And tanks are basically just mobile vehicles that have a big gun on them. And they're helpful because they're made out of metal. So what can you not do to them? Shoot them with regular guns. Okay. Shooting them with guns is no good. That's no bueno. All right. Now, when people first saw tanks, they were a little bit scared. They had more of a psychological effect than anything else. Because normally, when you shoot something with a gun, it's pretty effective. But you start shooting your rifle at these tanks, and it doesn't do it, doesn't work. Also, infantry figured out too, if you're really smart, where do you get near the tank? You get behind the tank. Okay? You get behind the tank, all right? Because it's safer there. It's like a shield. And then when you got close to the enemy, you'd all fan out and you like just start shooting away at them. Oh, it's going to be exciting. All right? So armor is talking about tanks. Tanks, and by the way, they moved really slow at first. You know how fast tanks in World War I would go? 10 to 15 miles an hour. It's not very fast. All right? But it's scary because like here's this big metal object coming at you. You're like, I don't know what to do. All right? Now, another term that has to do with another technology here, another term I want you to be familiar with is something called a sortie. Ooh, right? It always makes me think of Smarties, the candy, but that's not it at all. A sortie is an air mission, okay? Airplanes are going to be a thing, man. Sorties are air missions. Anytime pilots go out on a mission, it's called a sortie. And in case you're wondering the etymology of that word, and I know you are, it comes from the French word sortir, which means to go out. Oh, I know. Look at the etymology language. Okay. Oh, hang on here. We got to go back for a second. All right. Sortie is talking about where pilots would go on a mission. Okay. So if we're all pilots and I'm like, guys, we got a sortie today. And Abigail's like, yes, I'm ready to kill the enemy. All right. And you would shoot down many planes, would you not? All right. Question, comment, Quinlan. Oh, we're going to talk about that in a minute too. So hold that thought. One other thing that we want to mention in terms of like military terms is what's called a theater of conflict. Okay? When we're talking in military and somebody mentions like, oh, this is happening in this theater, it's just a different area where the war's going on. Wars go on in multiple locations at once. Okay? So if they say, oh, this is going on in this theater, the Eastern Theater, there is a part of the war that's going on separately from other parts. And in World War I, we'll get to in a minute, but there are three theaters of conflict, three different places where the war is really going on full force. Okay? There's three theaters of conflict. All right, so we got infantry, artillery, armor, we got airplanes, sorties that are going on, and theaters of conflict, different locations where the war is happening. All right, we got past the tanks again. Now we're going to talk about some newer weapons that develop. All right, and the first one is the machine gun. Ooh. All right, and this is an example of a World War I era machine gun. Machine guns are not what people think. Okay, a lot of times people look at what we call now assault rifles and think that's a machine gun. It's not. This is a machine gun. Machine guns are usually like you can see that it's got a tripod stand, and these things are usually pretty heavy. They'll weigh 60, 70 pounds. Like you can't just normally pick this up like you would something else and fire it unless you're ridiculously strong. Okay, but you can also see it usually has belt-fed ammunition. All right, and machine guns, remember, what's the advantage of these things? They fire fast. These right here, the World War I era machine guns, usually fired like a couple hundred rounds or a couple hundred bullets per minute. Right? So you're getting 300 to 400 rounds of ammunition a minute. That's literally a couple bullets a second. And it's different than your traditional guns because literally all you do is have to hold on the trigger. All right? And traditional rifles, it's like you'd shoot it one time, and then like the World War I, you had what were called bolt action rifles, where you literally like you shoot once, you take a little bolt, pull it back, pull back the lever, it would eject the empty shell, and then the next one would be when you put the bolt back in, it would insert the next bullet. Okay? But these right here, you just hold down the trigger, man. And look, this is going to cause a lot of death and devastation because up until this point, how were wars like? How did two armies fight each other? They just lined up. Like think of like the old Civil War mentality. Like there's the enemy, they're coming at us, we're coming at them. We're going to shoot them with rifles, and we're going to see who's got the guts to stand here longer and kill more of the other. All right. But the machine gun's different. Do you want to stand in front of this? Not a chance, because you will melt away like a human, like just, it's disgusting almost. All right. You do not want to be on the business end of a machine gun. All right. All right, and this is what Clint was talking about. It's going to lead to our next thing here in a second too. Early on in World War I, people like they always fight wars using the old tactics because they haven't seen machine guns in battle yet. All right, and so the first few battles of the World War I, people don't know what to do when they see the machine guns, and so they're just lined up traditionally, and they get mowed down. Okay, so to deal with the machine gun, that takes us to the second thing on this list. People start to get not get shot by this. They start digging trenches into the ground. A lot of World War I is going to be fought through what we call trench warfare. Okay, they start digging trenches because look, if you're down here in a trench, the machine gun can't get you. All right, trench warfare. Right, and you can see they actually started planning out these trenches. Like these are like copies of blueprints for trenches. They organized these in ways so that you could fight out of the trenches. Now you can see that a lot of the trenches, like this is a very makeshift trench, meaning that they probably had to dig it in a hurry. And you can see though that these soldiers right here, what are they standing in? Mud or water, which is pretty disgusting. Okay, it's a little bit of a problem. All right, trench warfare, and let me show you what a battlefield would look like with trench warfare. Okay, so like here's our front line. All right, and opposite of us is going to be the enemy. All right, but if you want to come at us, you've got a lot of things to deal with. If you look, here's the front line trench. All right, and back you have a support trench. You also have a concrete box, what we call a pillbox, that has a machine gun coming out of it. Okay, And usually you'd have a narrow enough space to put the machine gun so you could shoot out easy, but what does it make it really difficult for others to do? Shoot in at you. All right. You also have communication trenches back here, and you see artillery is here. Artillery back then could fire like 6 to 7 miles away. All right. So while we're here defending our trench, like if you try to come at us, we're going to be able to shoot you with artillery. We're going to be able to shoot you with uh, our machine guns here from the pillbox. We also have our frontline soldiers here as well. Okay. You also have barbed wire up here near the front. All right. So look, if you're brave enough to charge at our trench, there's a lot of ways you could die. Fun fact too, has anybody ever tried to climb something with barbed wire on it? Whatever happened to children? Don't y'all have a death wish or something? Back in my day, when we saw barbed wire, they're like, they must not us wanted to, we don't want us to get in there. So that meant we wanted to try. So one of my buddies would always like, let's see if we can do this. And barbed wire, you always think you can avoid it, but you can't. All right, you always get cut. Somebody always gets cut. Okay. Also, by the time that you try to get through the barbed wire, even if you're good enough to get through the barbed wire, what's happening while you're going through it? You get shot. All right. If they don't shoot you with the rifles, they'll shoot you with this, and that's if you're lucky enough to avoid the artillery. On top of that, up here, you've got airplanes that are getting involved. Okay. Now, airplanes are relatively new technology. 1914, it's only been 10 years, 10 or 11 years since the Wright brothers flew their first flight. But originally, what they used the airplanes for was just as reconnaissance, okay? Meaning that they wanted to scan the battlefield and see what was happening, see if troop movements and things like that. And then they started, like, back then, early on, what you do is, like, if he's a German pilot and I'm a British pilot, we'd fly by each other. First, you just wave at them. You're like, hey, hey, you know? But then they got the bright idea, hey, maybe our pilots would be better if they had, like, pistols, okay? And the pistol, like I could shoot at him from the plane with a pistol. But beyond that, too, there was another reason you wanted your pilot to have a pistol. In case they get shot down, okay? Usually, if your plane got shot, it would catch on fire to some capacity. And as you're going down, they wanted to give you an option: either die in the crash or you could take your own life. Right? Yeah, I know. It's like slightly uncomfortable either way. But also, too, they hadn't really invented parachutes yet. So it's like, look, and pilots, this is probably one of the most dangerous jobs. A good portion of the pilots who go up their first time don't ever come back. Like, I think the statistics are like 40% of the pilots who get shot down, it's like their first trip up because they don't know what they're doing yet. Now, the Germans and others figured out, too, hey, what if we just, instead of giving them pistols, what if we start putting machine guns on the airplanes and attaching bombs to them? So imagine you're charging at one of these trenches, you're trying to take the enemy position. Okay. First of all, do you think it would be easy for a commander to get his people to charge at a trench? No. All right. So what you would have a lot of times is our trenches are over here, and then right across the way, you'd have the enemy trenches. Okay? The space in between they referred to as no man's land. And if you're gutsy enough to run out there, and it's crazy too, because you're in the trenches and like we're hunkering down, and all of a sudden the word comes down that the general has given the order that we're going to attack. We're going to assault an enemy trench. Okay? Roe, are you down with that? You're going to do it anyway. And then all of a sudden they're going to yell out, over the top! And then you go over top of the trench, you start running, you're like, ah! And then you fall down dead, or you see your best friend get shot beside you, and it's really discomforting. Okay? Something else, Ed? Well, yeah, back and forth, you're going to find out trench warfare is really ugly. Okay? And you literally are not going to have a lot of ground that changes hands. This is like a side view of the trench. The Germans were actually better at trenches. See, the British and the French, they never really dug their trenches like with any expertise or thinking about the engineering of it because they never thought they would be there very long. They always thought we're going to attack the other side, we're going to defeat them, so we don't need to stay here. The Germans are like, actually, we better plan to make this a good trench. And so they put down boards. You would have what's called a fire step where you could stand here and you'd be covered by the sandbags here, but your rifle would be able to shoot over top. Okay. But even then, you had to be careful about sticking your head up because you never know when an enemy soldier is out there just looking for somebody to pick off. Oh, I'm ready to serve. How about you? Okay. This is really discomforting. Okay. Now, inside the trenches, there are a lot of problems. Okay. And we're still in the trenches. This is inside the trenches here. You can see that, you make a spot wherever you can to get in there. But look, the trenches, here's the weird thing too. In World War One, the trenches have such terrible conditions that it's not what you can see that kills you, it's what you can't see. Bacteria is going to end up killing more people than anything else. Disease becomes a big problem. All right. These are such unsanitary conditions. Fun fact, more people in World War One will die from disease than they will from bullets. Okay. Ultimately, like even if you got shot in the shoulder, you could develop a bacterial infection, and that it might end up killing you because guess what hasn't been invented yet? There's no antibiotics. All right. So sometimes a wounded soldier was just as good as a dead one. Right? Because eventually they're going to die anyway. All right. Now, something that Quinlan's like, oh, I can't wait for this one. Another problem you had to deal with, lice, body lice in particular. Okay. You don't get to take a shower every day, right? And people smell disgusting. Plus, there's dead bodies out there. And body lice is even worse, disgusting. Look, sometimes, I'm not joking, look at those little guys right there. What, your hair start itching now a little bit, you're scratching, you're like, oh, they got as big as grains of rice. Lice and rice, they rhyme together. How about that? Can you imagine picking those out of your armpit or something? What? Oh, come on. Look, that's nothing. That's nothing. All right. Uh, this is the best right here. Trench foot is a real problem. Oh, oh. Sometimes those bacterial and fungal infections get into your feet. If you don't change your boots and your socks on the regular, if you're standing in nasty water all the time, I know it's like a train wreck. You want to look away, but you can't. I know. Trench foot's a real problem. That if you don't do that, like for example, have you ever had athlete's foot before? Like athlete's foot's like a fungus that gets between your toes and it'll cause the skin to crack a little bit. And if you don't like, if you play like sports a lot and your feet are sweating frequently, and even if you change them, you can get that. And it's not bad at all. You just put some spray in there and it's fine in a couple of days. That right there, your foot's literally like melting off. Yeah, and there are bacterial infections and fungal infections that will still do that to you if you don't take care of yourself. Okay? And so life in the trench is difficult because not only do you have to worry about the enemy, which you've got artillery, you've got machine guns, you've got infantry with rifles, right? But you've got unseen problems like this trench foot, lice, and also, too, you don't need to remember the specifics, but like cholera, which is a waterborne infection. Like if you don't have clean water, cholera and other waterborne infections will get you. And if you've never had cholera before, that's a good thing. All right. But basically, some of these bacteria, they cause you to get diarrhea and vomiting. And so imagine you're sick in the trenches and you're also worried about the enemy trying to kill you and you get dehydrated. I mean, who wants to serve in this? What else can we add on this pile of crap? There's always more danger. Okay. There's always more danger. All right. Poison gas. Poison gas. All right. There's two main types of poison gas we're going to use in World War One. Oh, hang on here. One of them is called mustard gas. Okay. I know. Ever make your jokes? They call it mustard gas because it had a yellowish color to it. Okay. Mustard gas was literally a chemical gas that would cause your nervous system to start reacting like in a haywire manner. Okay. And what it would do is it would cause you to start coughing and you could temporarily lose your vision or permanently lose your vision. And in some instances, it would cause blistering on the skin and it could even cause death. Right? And so gas, like they're like, wow, this is a dangerous substance. And they didn't mind that it didn't kill all the time because it did something even worse. Like let's say that Quinlan gets affected by mustard gas and he's in the hospital and like we're all there too and we see he's got been blistered up, he's temporarily lost his vision and He's hacking up a lung over there. He's like, God, I wish I had COVID. Uh, you know, he's got all kinds of health problems, and we're like, man, that's what happens when you go into battle. That's disgusting. Okay, what is it? Yeah, it is like a form of psychological warfare. That sometimes psychologically messed up soldier is just as good as anybody else because he scares everybody else. And is Quinlan going to want to go into battle even when he's healthy again? No, he's concerned. All right. The other major gas we use, chlorine gas. Okay. The chemical element chlorine in its gaseous form is toxic to human beings. If you inhale too much of it, you will die. Right. The good news, though, you're going to love this. Not only did we start creating gas masks, but chlorine gas, there was a good way to neutralize it, and it's easy to produce. All you needed was something of cotton, like a shirt or like a cotton pad or a handkerchief or whatever. And anybody know what substance you have to put on it to neutralize chlorine? Nope. Urine. You could pee on it. So if you were in a jam and you didn't have a gas mask and we were all going to die if we didn't, then ultimately what we would have to do is we'd have to pee on a cotton cloth pad or something like that and hold it up to your face. Well, yeah, they were basically like the urine inside there neutralizes the chlorine. So they're like, how can we get urine? Well, you just pee on it. All right. Does it sound gross? Sure. Is that better than dying from chlorine? Yeah, because the chlorine gas, what it does is it starts causing blistering in your lungs and it causes fluid to build up, which is almost like you're kind of drowning in your own fluids and you start coughing violently. The one good thing was is that even if you got affected by it, sometimes you'd be coughing so much that you wouldn't be inhaling as much, and so you just cough really bad and need a couple of days to rest. Yes. Hitler got affected by mustard gas during this war. He temporarily lost his vision too. All right, man, this is awful. What else can we throw on this pile of craziness? Hand grenades. All right, hand grenades were really effective when you got up into the trenches because if let's say I get through all the defenses, like I get through the barbed wire, all the artillery, and everything else, and I get close to your trench, what I would do is just take a hand grenade, toss it down in there. That'll take care of some business right there. Okay, man. Hand grenades, baby. This is the first time hand grenades are readily available. Another fun fact, too, and this kind of goes with hand grenades, flamethrowers get used for the first time. All right. Flamethrowers are really good, too, when you get up close to the trenches, because if I'm up here and you're down there in the trench, I'm just going to roast you. We'll have a barbecue. Is that a little much? Maybe. All right. Vehicles. You get new vehicles in this as well, but I want to show you some of the weaponry. This is another example of the artillery. Look how big this is. This is a smaller example of British artillery, but the Germans were really good. Fun fact of the day here: there was a famous German company called Krupp, and they always made artillery and other weapons. And the guy who was in charge of the family company at the time, he named his biggest cannon after his wife. Anybody know what the name of the cannon was? Big Bertha. I know, it's bizarre. All right. More soldiers in the trenches. That's a little bit closer up with that. I'm sure. New vehicles. These are the airplanes at the time. Okay. We said airplanes are terribly dangerous. These are the Germans. The Black Cross signifies that the Germans, those are German planes in particular. The airplanes and the tanks are the new vehicles that we're talking about. We already referenced those. We'll talk a little bit more about them tomorrow, and then we'll get into the specifics of the conflict itself. All right. So that's your history of some military terms.